Hello everybody. If you've been following the channel for a while, there's a good chance you've seen one of my many reviews of lovely Japanese stuff imported by the wonderful Brad. However, on this occasion, I think it's possible he might have gone a bit too far. Today, I present to you my review of his 2002 Mitsubishi Lancer Cedia Turbo T-Touring. A car as complex as its name is long. Now, one of the things that I do dearly love about Brad is the fact that he loves to import all the weird stuff that people often don't think about. Things like the Toyota Crown Majesta, the Nissan 370 GT Cross. Not once has he even said to me, James, I'm bringing over a Supra, a Skyline, or an RX-7. Instead, he brings me stuff like this. And one of the best parts of doing these reviews is getting to find out all this interesting information about models that previously I didn't really know. However, when it came to this, the Lancer Cedia, I have had the devil's own task, because there is really next to nothing about this car out there in the English language. Therefore, I am going to share with you now everything I have managed to find out, which I hope is mostly accurate, and then if you do happen to know a little bit more about them, I invite you to hop into the comment section and tell me what it is that I've missed or simply got wrong. So then, this is a member of the 8th generation of the Mitsubishi Lancer family. The significance of this is that I think from about the 3rd to 7th generation, the Lancer was spun off the Mirage, but for the 8th, it once again became its own thing. Now, I'm almost certain that you are going to be familiar with a Lancer of some description, most likely the rather magnificent Mitsubishi Lancer Evolution, in one of its many guises, the rally hero and perennial rival to many a Subaru. But this is not really one of those. Though yes, it is a Lancer, and yes, it has a turbo, and I do believe this body shape was available in Britain, there endeth the similarities. This car in particular, the Lancer Cedia, sold in some places as simply the Lancer and others as just the Cedia, was aimed at a rather different audience. First up, and perhaps most significantly for some, this car is not all-wheel drive. In fact, it turns only the fronts, which is in contrast to some of the other JDM estates that Brad has recently brought me, including the Toyota Mark II Blitz and the Crown, where there, if you don't have all-wheel drive, they'll instead turn the rear wheels. You also have here, for the majority of models, a naturally aspirated engine. But thankfully, this is the turbo, and there are a couple of reasons that is a thing to be thankful for. First up, because it means you've got a little bit more power. But if you were hoping that meant sort of 276 horses in line with everything else Japanese of the time, you're about to be sorely disappointed. Though it may be a 4G93, the engine that was also found in the likes of the Lancer Evo. This one displaces 1.8 litres, and thanks to its relatively low pressure turbo that puts out just 0.4 bar, it makes 165 horsepower and about 163 pound-foot of torque. That's 220 Newton meters. And I'm afraid it gets worse. The Cedia was available either as a sedan or, as we have it here, an estate. And if you got the sedan, you had the choice of either a 5-speed manual gearbox or a 4-speed torque converter automatic. If you got the estate, you didn't get the choice. You got the 4-speed auto. Now, to be honest, this gearbox isn't actually anywhere near as awful as I thought it was going to be. Part of that is because it has the decency to set off in first, and the reality is that many a 5 or 6-speed gearbox will actually set off in second, and so in terms of number of ratios available, it effectively has the same as many later ones. It is also a fairly smooth shifting thing. It gets from first to fourth almost imperceptibly, and when you come in to pull out at a junction or the like, it's really quite decent. I cannot though say the same for these tyres, which are Bridgestones and aren't even horrendously old, but they are Japanese specification, and this car just does not have much grip whatsoever. Or power. That's 50. There's 60. It makes an alright noise, and I think you can probably fairly safely ignore the Remus sticker on the side. Doesn't sound like this has an aftermarket pipe to me. In fact, at the back, you can't see any pipe at all, which is kind of disappointing for a car that evidently is aimed at a sort of sporty buyer. And you do have to ask yourself, what sort of sporty buyer wants an estate car that drives the front wheels, has a 4-speed automatic gearbox, and only 165 horses? Well, herein lies the secret. And this is the fact that this car, even by Mitsubishi's own expectations, was never meant to sell in big numbers. It instead was meant to shift, as far as they were concerned, about 3,000 units a month. And that's not a lot. In fact, I'm not sure that's 3,000 units for the turbo. I think that's 3,000 units full stop. Oh, by the way, I did say earlier you should be thankful for the turbo. Not only does it give you more power than the regular car, but also if you were to go with the regular car, you wouldn't get a manual, you wouldn't even get this 4-speed torque converter automatic, you'd get a CVT. However, this car was sold not only to Japan, but I'm also told the other large markets for it were Malaysia and India, where this was sold to customers who had to be cost conscious, for whom ultimate outright power was not really an issue, and for that reason the car is designed to be a little more economical than others. That's why the turbo doesn't have much in the way of boost. The engine is relatively lean burn. Fuel economy, I unfortunately can't quote you. Brad hasn't driven it for long enough. There isn't a trip computer that tells you that sort of thing, so yeah, I don't know. I mean, I expect it's not going to be 50 to the gallon, put it that way. But this car was priced very keenly, about $18,000 for the top-of-the-line model when you could get it new. And ultimately, I think the point of this car was that it was marketed towards people who wanted something that looked sporty, sounded sporty, has the Lancer name, the Mitsubishi badge with all of its rally heritage, and of course, a turbo, but that was going to be day-to-day usable. And on that front, it actually does okay. It's not a massive car, just under 4.5 meters long. In fact, if you got the turbo version, it was actually something like that much bigger on account of the front bumper. But you've got plenty of space in here for at least 4 adults, if not 5. The boot also is a very uniform size, very usable and quite nice. The seats will fold flat, and I have to say that looking at this in the particularly odd shade it is, it did remind me more than a little bit of many a Volvo of the same era. And that I think is probably a good thing, because apparently these days Volvos are cool. They were also available, I'm told, in other colours such as yellow, and Brad was tempted to repaint it, but the fact is, when you buy a car like this, if you're going to start doing things like repainting it or wrapping it, that's a serious investment. And like most of his cars, this was never intended to be a long-term resident on the driveway. For those who don't know, he essentially buys stuff in, well, bulk, really. He'll import 4 or 5 cars at the same time, use each of them for a little bit, and then some of them will be kept, but most of them shall be moved on. I'm told that he's got some projects at home to deal with at the moment, so he needs to free up a little bit of space on the driveway, and so this soon will be moved on. This also being a car that Brad has had imported directly from Japan, it's packed with all those little things you get in Japanese cars, like the little boost gauge here, a Defi one, which is proper. You've also got a genuine Japanese dash cam up here that works just fine. Perhaps most weirdly of all, you've also got a big widescreen LCD thing here, a Pioneer unit that currently appears to be a GPS, and I think that might be why there's 2 little antennas kind of stuck on the back of the car there. I'm not sure where I am, but they spell it sort of like that. Don't know. You've also got a Kenwood stereo down here that is pretty amazing, because not only is it CD, but if you press a button, you'll also get a slot for a mini disc. The steering wheel I like. It feels like it's come off of a proper Lancer Evo. because it probably has. I have to say I'm not getting on spectacularly well with this seat. I'm not uncomfortable in it, but it is just a little bit unforgiving in terms of its base, which I wouldn't mind if it was also quite heavily bolstered, but it's not. It's just a bit weird, really. And in case you were wondering, no, Brad didn't put these stickers on. The car came over like that. And though his first thought was to simply remove them, he then figured, actually, you know what? It's a Japanese thing. People probably like them, or some people will, and whoever buys it can then choose whether they want to retain them or not. Now we're out on the open road, let's also talk a little bit more about the way the car drives. And one thing that did have me concerned about this is when I went through the list of what you got if you bought the turbo version, is you had some of the good stuff, like these nice Enkei wheels, you've got the body kit, this interior apparently is bespoke to the turbo too, and of course you've got the extra power as well, but it also came with what they call a racing suspension. Now, I don't know about the roads of Malaysia or India, but the roads of Japan are notoriously smooth and very unlike the roads that I drive, and when I see racing suspension attached to anything, I tend to get worried. Japanese racing suspension, doubly so, because ordinarily I'd think that over a section like this, I'll lose my fillings. But actually, it's not that bad. You're always aware that there is a reasonably firm suspension down there, but it's not crashy, it's not overly harsh. The bit I'm finding the oddest at the moment is the fact that the steering itself is quite slow, fairly light as well, does have a little bit of texture coming through it, but just doesn't have any weighting, so you don't really get much of an idea of how much you're asking from the front end. It doesn't then help that I know for a fact there just isn't all that much grip available, so I'm being quite cautious with this thing, and that's a shame, because actually I think with some decent fresh rubber on here it'd actually be pretty alright. As it happens, I've just got out of a Vauxhall Adam S, which down a road like this would thrash the pants off the Mitsubishi, but you know something? I'm kind of getting into the groove with this car now. I'm really beginning to enjoy it. Oh no, we've got a Caravan coming up. I don't think I'm going to get past that. These 165 horses, I don't think they're quite enough, but I do have a turning point coming up soon, so we'll spin around, I'll put my foot down and see if we can extract any more out of this, but I've been fairly happy with the progress we're making, to be honest. I think it's probably about all we're going to get. Well, I can actually change gear manually if I want, so I suppose I should also try and do that. Does it do it very quickly? No. Does it shift up quickly? I mean, quick enough, but honestly, there's only 4 gears to choose from. I mean, it's a bit redundant, really, isn't it? Oh, just found the remote for the screen over there. Wonder if I can get any Japanese. Look at how Japanese that is. I think that button does Pac-Man. Right. Let's test the turning circle, shall we? Oh, actually, you know what? It's really good. Really, really good. And let's go. Oh, yeah. Brakes are reasonable. Nice pedal feel, actually. Yeah, I like that. Once you start to push on, does the steering weight up a little bit more? Like, marginally, but it's never going to be award-winning. A real shame, because actually one of the things that I love about the Lancer Evo, certainly compared to the Impreza, is how good their steering is. The Subarus always feels a bit limp and lifeless, but the Mitsubishis is... Their gearboxes are also generally pretty decent, but again, in here it's just a sort of auto thing, so yeah. And this car does leave me in a bit of a quandary, really, because, well, it's not a bad car, really. I just struggling to work out who it's for, in any sense, really. Some of the previous stuff that Brad has brought me, like the Crowns and whatnot, you can go, okay, yeah, if you want like a murky class or a Jag or something, but a bit different, get one of those. However, if you're looking for a sort of Japanese estate car alternative to a BMW 3 Series or the like, then, you know, go and get the Mark II Blit that Brad has got, or the Crown. Wonderful things with gorgeous, silky smooth engines. That fabulous Toyota JZ. It's a wonderful thing, a legendary power plant for a very, very good reason. This certainly feels sportier, certainly feels more firmly suspended, feels a little bit keener in the corners, but suffers, I think, with these tyres specifically in terms of traction. However, in terms of packaging, it's a smaller car with at least as much room inside, or it certainly feels that way. The interior is not particularly high quality, lots of fabric and sort of that, whatever that is, vinyl, I think. But, you know, it does the job. However, I don't know. I suppose it's for the people that bought an Impreza without a turbo, but it's got a turbo, so you can tell your mates it's got a turbo. Just don't tell them how small it is. Apparently, with a remap, you can get them up to over 200 horses. Put a filter in, an exhaust, that sort of thing. You might get 230 horsepower, apparently. I mean, I don't know if I'd want 230 horsepower out of it, though. That's the thing. You might then suddenly find, actually, that front-wheel drive is just not up to the task. It seems happy with what it's got. And how much are you going to pay for this? Well, that, I suppose, is the other issue. About £6,000 to £7,000 is what Brad is asking. Again, like many of his other cars, there isn't another out there that's like it. And I happen to know that Brad is very, very fair with what he asks. He goes through all the process of getting the cars over, sorts them out, anything big needs doing, it gets done. And he doesn't really make much money off these cars. He does it because he loves the cars. But this would also be the sort of money that would get you into his Toyota Blademaster. Not a dissimilar amount of money that would get you into his Toyota Crown Majesta. And they would both be cars I would get into before this. So it's not a bad car. It's just weird. And not in a good way. Not in a sort of Toyota Serra kind of way, or Renault Avantime kind of way. It's, I don't know, odd. It's the sort of, you know, grey socks of the JDM world. I suppose really, maybe, the person that this would appeal to here is the people it was designed for. Those on a bit of a budget that like the idea of a Lancer Evo wagon, but can't really have a genuine Lancer Evo. I mean, because the prices on those have gone mad anyway, and now 6 to 7 grand for something with a Lancer badge on is not so bad. Oh, incidentally, if you do want to laugh, Cedia, apparently, stands for Century Diamond. And I can't think of any car less appropriate to be called the Century Diamond. You look at the Toyota Century, and that is the flagship, the jewel in the crown of Toyota's automotive magnificence. This, though, it'd be like calling a, I don't know, BMW 1 Series the Brilliant. Well, they've got two things, haven't they? It would be the Magnificent Brilliance. They'd call it the Malliance. Oh, dear. I think that might be the most Jeremy Clarkson thing I've ever said. And on that bombshell, probably time to end the review. So, I want to say a big thank you yet again to Brad for bringing his car out, and as ever, to you for watching. Don't forget to hit the like button, comment down below, particularly if you know what on earth this car actually is, and I'll see you for the next one. Bye-bye.